What happens when a hotel receptionist humiliates man? But it was Donald Trump. But before you dive into this story, please like, share and subscribe my channel, and please comment your valuable thoughts. At a 5-star hotel, Sarah Chen neatly adjusted her name tag and smoothed out her crisp uniform for what seemed like the 10th time that morning. The lobby of the Peninsula New York, shining with its marble floors, was buzzing with the usual mix of harried business travelers, wealthy guests, and impeccably trained staff. With 7 years of experience at the front desk, Sarah had an almost sixth sense about the day's pace, but today had a different aura. "Morning briefing in 5 minutes," announced Marcus, her supervisor, as he passed by with his ever-present tablet. "The UN General Assembly has the city in a knot, so we might see some peculiar scenarios today." Sarah, nodding, was already checking the day's reservation list on her computer. The Peninsula was fully booked. Every suite, every standard room, even the spare maintenance rooms due to the UN General Assembly, which always attracted a surge of diplomats, security details, and affluent spectators to Manhattan. This year, however, seemed especially packed. "Did you hear about today's planned protests?" whispered Jenny, a newer receptionist, excitement twinkling in her eyes as she settled next to Sarah. It was all still so new to her after just 6 months on the job. "Jenny, let's focus on our guests," Sarah gently reminded her. "Whatever happens outside doesn't concern us unless it affects a guest's stay." The morning briefing covered routine matters, VIP arrivals, special requests, security updates. Sarah, meticulous as ever, took detailed notes, though she hardly needed them. The standards of service at the Peninsula were ingrained in her. "One last thing," Marcus added, consulting his tablet. "The President's security team will sweep the presidential suite at 4 p.m. Ensure all staff steer clear of the 19th floor then." As the team dispersed, Sarah sensed that peculiar feeling again, like the calm before a storm. She shook it off, focusing on welcoming a lovely elderly couple from Toronto celebrating their 50th anniversary. "I've arranged for champagne and chocolates in your room," she smiled genuinely, handing them their key cards. "Please contact me directly if you need anything during your stay." The day progressed with a typical flow of guest interactions. Sarah, with her usual grace, managed each request, from delivering a forgotten toothbrush to room 1507, to calming an irate businessman whose room wasn't ready, to securing last-minute theater tickets for a family of 4. "How do you make it seem so effortless?" Jenny asked during a brief lunch break. That man was nearly exploding over his room, but within 5 minutes he was practically apologizing. "People just want to feel heard and respected, even when they're being unreasonable," Sarah explained, stirring her tea. "If you make them feel understood, most situations can be diffused." "Well, except for that time we had to refuse draining the rooftop pool for a guest who wanted to practice his golf putting," Sarah laughed, reminiscing about the more outlandish requests. The afternoon ushered in more arrivals, and Sarah's trained eye picked up on the subtle signs of affluence and influence. "Miss Chen," buzzed Alberto from security into her earpiece, "there's an issue in the parking garage. Some unauthorized photographers are trying to snap pictures of the diplomatic vehicles." "I'll notify Marcus," she responded smoothly, while directing a bellhop to assist another guest laden with shopping bags. As the sun set, casting a golden glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the lobby settled into an evening lull. A pianist played soft jazz in the lounge, and guests mingled over pre-dinner drinks. Just as Sarah resolved a room temperature issue for a European couple, a stir at the revolving door caught her attention. The murmur of whispers from the bar, the click of camera phones, it was all unusual. As the door completed its rotation, Sarah's stomach flipped. Donald Trump stood there, not with the polished appearance she'd seen in media, but slightly disheveled, his hair mussed, his tie loose, and a stain on his shirt, strikingly alone. Where was his security? His entourage? His usual advisers? Something was amiss. Straightening up, Sarah prepared her standard professional smile, ready to greet him. The lobby fell silent, the piano music now a surreal soundtrack to the unfolding scene. Trump's footsteps echoed across the marble, his expensive shoes noticeably in need of polish. "Good evening, sir," Sarah started, sticking to her practiced greeting as he approached the desk. But before she could say more, he interrupted her abruptly. "I need your best suite now." His voice was brusque, trying to exude his usual air of assurance, yet Sarah detected undertones of anxiety, perhaps even desperation. He slapped a black credit card on the counter with unnecessary force, the sharp sound echoing across the quiet lobby. Automatically, Sarah's training took over. Stay calm, maintain eye contact, show respect, yet be assertive. She could feel the gaze of every guest in the lobby on her as she picked up the credit card. "Thank you, Mr. Trump. Let me check our availability for you," she said, her fingers flying across her keyboard, though she already knew the outcome. Every room, every suite was taken, but protocol demanded she verify it. As she typed, she felt his eyes on her name tag. "Sarah Chan," he read out, his tone ambiguous. "You Chinese?" "I was born in San Francisco, sir," she responded smoothly, focusing on the screen while inside. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. 7 years of experience had honed her ability to handle moments like these. The computer confirmed her expectation. Sarah took a quiet breath, steeling herself for the inevitable. She noticed phones being lifted around the lobby, their cameras pointed her way. Whatever happened next would likely be seen by thousands, perhaps millions. "Mr. Trump," she began, her voice clear and professional, "I apologize, but all our luxury suites are currently taken due to the United Nations General Assembly." She watched as his eyes widened slightly, his jaw clenched, and a flush began to spread up his neck. Her years of reading guests' reactions told her this was a moment that would be discussed in staff meetings for a long time. But right now, she was just a receptionist doing her job, and the strange sensation she felt that morning finally clicked. The calm before the storm had passed. The storm was here. Earlier that morning, Sarah Chan had stood at the front desk, watching the early light filter through the towering glass doors. At 6:45 a.m., the magnificent lobby was tranquil, the calmest it would be all day. "Coffee," Marco from the restaurant offered, presenting her with her usual Americano. "You're a lifesaver," she smiled, taking a grateful sip, bracing for a busy breakfast service with 3 ambassadors and their entourages plus the usual corporate crowd. "Remember last year with the K-pop group and those screaming fans?" Sarah chuckled to Marco, recalling the chaos. Speaking of chaos, Jenny, her new colleague, burst through the staff entrance, breathless. "Sorry, the subway was crazy. Some protest on Fifth Avenue. It's UN Assembly Week," she exclaimed, to which Sarah and Marco responded in unison, then laughed. The morning briefing began promptly at 7 a.m., with Marcus looking more serious than usual. "Listen up, everyone. This isn't just another UN week. We've got an unprecedented number of high-profile guests. 4 presidents, including Mr. Khan in the presidential suite, 2 prime ministers, 3 royal families, and more CEOs than I can count. Every single room is booked. Yes, Jenny, even the maintenance rooms on 14, he stressed, indicating there was absolutely no room for error. Now, let's be vigilant," Marcus continued as Alberto from security discussed the day's protocols. For Sarah, who had been here 7 years, longer than most of the current staff, the peninsula felt like a second home, its rhythms as familiar as her own heartbeat. Back at the front desk, Sarah began her routine, checking the system, reviewing VIP arrivals, ensuring all special requests were logged. Jenny hovered nearby, asking, "How do you stay so calm during crazy weeks like this?" "It's experience," Sarah replied, then reconsidered, "Actually, it's more than that. It's about reading people. See that gentleman by the concierge desk." She gestured toward a middle-aged man in a pricey suit, animatedly talking, his tie perfectly straight. but his shoes were in need of a polish. He was here on business, likely finance, and wasn't accustomed to luxury hotels. Notice how he constantly scans the area, as if he's evaluating the cost of everything. How can you tell all this? Jenny inquired, astounded. 7 years of observing people, Sarah replied. Now, look at that woman over there with the shopping bags, clad in Chanel. That's Mrs. Patterson. She stays here monthly, always in room 1642, which she prefers for its optimal morning light that complements her meditation routine. She adores our chamomile tea, though she never accepts the first pot, always requesting a fresh one, and curiously, she detests even numbers, except for her room number. She owns 3 Yorkshire Terriers, each named after Shakespearean characters. Jenny's eyes widened, impressed. That's incredible. You're like a detective around here. Just observant. In this role, attention to detail is crucial, Sarah explained. Just then, her phone buzzed. A message from housekeeping as the morning rush picked up. Guests were checking out and checking in. The phones were ringing non-stop, and special requests were stacking up. Ma'am, the presidential suite's piano was tuned just yesterday, Sarah assured one guest. Of course, sir. I'll have engineering adjust your room's humidity right away, she told another. Mrs. Patterson, your usual tea will be ready shortly. And yes, I'll ensure they bring a fresh second pot by noon. Around noon, a commotion outside drew their attention. Protesters had approached the hotel, their chants audible through the thick glass doors. Should we be worried? Jenny asked, peering through the windows. Security's on it, Sarah reassured her, keeping her focus on their guests. The afternoon presented its own array of characters. A tech billionaire checking in under a pseudonym, a famous actress donning sunglasses indoors, and 3 identically dressed men flashing diplomatic credentials. Hey, Sarah, Jenny called out around 4 p.m. There's a situation in 1825, something about the minibar. I've got it. Take your break. You haven't had lunch yet, Sarah urged. But it's so busy. Go, eat something. I've managed busier days by myself. As Jenny departed, Sarah felt that familiar tingle at the back of her neck, reminiscent of the hurricane 2 years prior that had forced them to shelter half of Wall Street in the lobby. The pianist began his evening set, the soft jazz providing a sophisticated backdrop as the lobby transitioned from day to night. Sarah watched the revolving doors as each new guest arrived, calculating room numbers and special requests in her mind. Miss Chen, a soft voice called. Mrs. Patterson looked concerned at the desk. I hate to bother you, but there is quite a crowd gathering outside. Sarah checked the security feeds. Indeed, the protest had swelled. Police barriers kept them from the hotel entrance, but their presence was undeniable. Nothing to worry about, Mrs. Patterson. Would you like an escort to the restaurant? No, dear, I'll manage, the older woman replied, leaning in closer, lowering her voice. I overheard something at the bar about a certain former president causing a stir at his own hotel. Quite the scene, apparently. Sarah's pulse quickened, but she maintained a neutral expression. I'm sure it's just rumors, Mrs. Patterson. Probably nothing. Right, dear. Oh, and that second pot of tea was perfect today, Mrs. Patterson noted as she walked away. Despite reassurances, Sarah couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. It was 8:45 p.m., just over 3 hours left in her shift. The lobby had settled into its evening rhythm. Well-dressed guests headed to dinner, others returned from shows or meetings, and the bar buzzed with animated conversations in multiple languages. Sarah was assisting another guest with theatre tickets when the ambient noise in the lobby changed, a ripple of whispers emanating from the entrance. The pianist's fingers hesitated momentarily on the keys. She heard the smartphones first, the distinct sound of camera apps snapping open, then the revolving door spun, marking a dramatic turn in Sarah Chen's otherwise ordinary Tuesday at the Peninsula New York. Donald Trump stood in the entrance, visibly distraught. His typically impeccable hair appeared as though he'd been anxiously running his hands through it. His red tie hung slightly askew, and a noticeable stain marred his right shirt cuff. Most strikingly, he was alone. No Secret Service, no aides, no entourage, just a man who seemed to be having a tremendously rough day. As he strode towards her desk, every eye in the lobby followed him. Sarah noted his shoes, the Italian leather begging for a polish, a detail she couldn't overlook. "Good evening, sir," she greeted him, ready to handle whatever came next. But he interrupted her before she could finish her standard greeting. "I need your best suite now," he demanded, slamming a black credit card onto the marble counter with excessive force. The sound reverberated sharply in the subdued lobby. Sarah's fingers swiftly moved across her keyboard, even though she knew the outcome. She stayed professional, following procedures, feeling the weight of many eyes and phones directed at them, capturing every moment. Trump fixated on her name tag as she typed. "Sarah Chan," he read aloud, his tone unsettling her slightly. "You Chinese." "I was born in San Francisco, sir," she responded, maintaining her composure and keeping her gaze fixed on the screen. Inside, her heart raced, but her hands were steady. 7 years on the job had taught her the importance of these next moments. The computer confirmed what she already knew. Taking a deep, quiet breath, she braced herself for the ensuing scene. The lobby was so silent now, she could hear the clink of ice cubes in glasses at the bar some 30 feet away. "Mr. Trump," she started, her voice both clear and professional, "I apologize, but all our luxury suites are fully booked due to the United Nations General Assembly." She immediately noticed his reaction, the slight widening of his eyes, the clenching of his jaw, the flush that began creeping up his neck. 7 years of observing guests told her this situation would be discussed for months. "Do you know who I am?" he pressed, his hands gripping the counter, knuckles whitening. At that moment, Sarah realized this ordinary Tuesday was about to turn extraordinary. Trump's voice boomed across the lobby, causing several guests at the bar to turn and stare. Despite this, Sarah maintained her professional demeanor. "Yes, Mr. Trump, I recognize you, but unfortunately, we truly have no suites available tonight." A woman in a black cocktail dress at the bar gasped to her companion, "Oh my God, is this really happening?" as she recorded the scene. Trump's face reddened further. "Listen here, young lady, I've owned hotels before you were even born. Better hotels than this." His voice escalated with each word. "I understand, sir, but no, you don't understand," he countered, slamming his palm down on the counter. "Call your manager." From the corner of her eye, Sarah saw Marcus, the supervisor, near the concierge desk, observing but allowing her to handle the situation as she had been trained to. "Sir, I am the senior desk manager this evening, and I can assure you, I've had enough of this nonsense." Trump cut her off, his voice reverberating off the marble walls. "I've owned better hotels than this. You think I haven't seen this game before? You're holding rooms back, aren't you? Always keep the premium suites reserved for the right guests, don't you?" An elderly couple, just stepping out of the elevator, quickly retreated back inside, opting to avoid the unfolding drama. The pianist had stopped playing entirely. Now the silence only made Trump's voice sound louder. "Actually, sir," Sarah replied calmly, "we are completely booked due to the UN General Assembly. President Macron is currently occupying our presidential suite." "Macron?" Trump's eyes sparked with a mix of recognition and competition. "Emmanuel? Call him. Call his room right now." Sarah blinked. "I'm sorry, sir, but we cannot disturb our guests, especially not to request they change rooms." "Can't disturb? Do you have any idea who you are talking to?" He leaned forward, his tone confrontational. "I was the President of the United States." A young man in the crowd murmured, "Yeah, was is the key word there." Trump spun around. Who said that? Who's recording this? You have no right. No right. Sarah saw Alberto and two other security officers discreetly approaching, but she gave them a subtle signal to hold back. She could still manage the situation. Mr. Trump, if you'd like, I can recommend several other excellent hotels in the area that might have availability. Other hotels? He turned back to her, incredulous. I don't want other hotels. I want your best suite right now. An elegant middle-aged woman approached the desk, seemingly oblivious to the tension. Excuse me, I need fresh towels in room 1216. Of course, Mrs. Whitmore, I'll have those sent up immediately, Sarah responded smoothly. Trump's face turned an alarming shade of red. This is ridiculous. This is discrimination. That's what this is. Mrs. Whitmore raised an eyebrow, then joined the crowd recording the scene with her phone. Sir, I assure you, this has nothing to do with discrimination, Sarah maintained her calm tone. It has everything to do with it. The fake news media, the deep state, they're all in on it. They probably told you not to rent to me, didn't they? Sarah kept her voice level. No one has told us anything, Mr. Trump. We simply have no available rooms. I built places like this. I made this city what it is, he shouted. You think a little girl like you can tell me no? Do you know how many people I've fired? How many careers I've ended? The lobby was now surprisingly full for 9 p.m., with hotel guests, bar patrons, and even some staff members gathered to watch the scene unfold. The soft chandelier light glinted off dozens of phone screens, all directed at the front desk. This is going straight to TikTok, someone whispered loudly. Trump spun around again. Delete those videos, delete them right now, he demanded, pointing at various phones in the crowd. You'll be hearing from my lawyers, all of you. A young woman in the crowd called out, Aren't all your lawyers in jail? This elicited a wave of laughter from the onlookers, making Trump's face turn even redder. You think this is funny? You think this is a joke? He turned back to Sarah. What's your full name again? Sarah Chen. I want your full name. You'll never work in hospitality again. I promise you that. Sarah stood her ground, her hands classively clasped in front of her. Sir, I understand you are frustrated, but threatening our staff is unacceptable. If you continue, I'll have to ask security to escort you out. Security? Your security, he laughed, but it was a harsh sound. I had the Secret Service, the best security in the world. Someone in the crowd coughed loudly. Trump ignored this, focusing his anger back on Sarah. Call Macron. Call him right now. As I explained, sir, we cannot. Fine, give me the phone. I'll call him myself, he said, reaching across the counter to grab the desk phone. Sarah quickly stepped back, and this time Alberto moved forward. Sir, please keep your hands away from the desk. Oh, now the rent-a-cop wants to play tough guy, Trump sneered. You have no idea who you are dealing with. I'll buy this place just to fire all of you. The crowd had grown larger, with people coming from the restaurant and bar to watch. The scene was being captured from every possible angle by dozens of phones. Mr. Trump, Sarah tried again. Please, let's handle this calmly. But before she could finish her greeting, he cut her off. I need your best suite now, he said, slamming a black credit card onto the marble counter with excessive force, the sound echoing sharply in the hushed lobby. As Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard, although she already knew the result, she maintained her professional demeanor, aware of the numerous phones capturing the unfolding drama. Sarah Chen. Trump read her name tag aloud, his tone unsettling. You Chinese. I was born in San Francisco, sir, she replied with a calm demeanor, her eyes never leaving the screen. Her heart raced, but her hands were steady. 7 years of experience had prepared her for moments like this. The computer confirmed the inevitable, and she took a quiet breath, bracing for his reaction. The lobby was so silent that the clink of ice cubes in glasses at the bar seemed loud. "Mr. Trump," she began in a clear, professional voice, "I apologize, but all our luxury suites are currently occupied due to the United Nations General Assembly." His reaction was immediate. His eyes widened, his jaw tightened, and a flush crept up his neck, typical signs of a brewing confrontation she knew would be remembered. "Do you know who I am?" he bellowed, his hands gripping the counter, knuckles whitening. Just then, a distinguished-looking man in the crowd quipped, "Not the last election, apparently," prompting laughter from the onlookers. Trump's face went from red to purple. "Who said that? Show yourself. More liberal elite staying at your overpriced hotel, is that it?" he ranted, gesturing wildly at the crowd. "Mr. Trump," Sarah interjected firmly, "this is your final warning. If you cannot maintain a professional demeanor, I will have to ask you to leave." He stared at her in disbelief. "You're going to throw me out?" A vein throbbed in his forehead. "Do you have any idea how much money I have? I could buy and sell this place 10 times over." "Then perhaps you should purchase a hotel with vacant rooms," Sarah retorted, her tone still professional but edged with firmness. The crowd oohed appreciatively, and someone shouted, "Damn, she really went there." Trump clenched the edge of the counter, his knuckles turning white. "You are making a big mistake. Huge. The biggest. Nobody treats me like this. Nobody." Sarah noticed Jenny, who had just returned from her break, standing frozen near the staff door, eyes wide. Sarah gave her a reassuring nod to stay put. "Call Macron," Trump demanded again, insistent. "He knows me. We have a very special relationship." "That will not be possible, sir," Sarah maintained. "Everything's possible for the right price," he countered, pulling out his wallet. "How much? Name your price." "Everyone has a price." "What's yours?" Sarah's expression remained impassive. "Sir, are you attempting to bribe a hotel employee?" The crowd went silent, phones still recording. Bribe? Who said anything about bribes? "I'm talking about business. I am a businessman. I make deals, the best deals. The only deal available, Mr. Trump, is that I can help you find accommodation at another hotel. Would you like me to make some calls?" His face contorted with rage. "You think you are clever, don't you? Standing there with your little name tag, playing games with me. I own the most beautiful hotels in the world. The most beautiful people beg to stay at my hotels. Then perhaps you should try one of those," Sarah suggested mildly. The lobby erupted in more laughter and scattered applause. Trump's face had reached a shade of red Sarah hadn't seen in her 7 years at the desk. "This is unacceptable. Completely unacceptable," he fumed, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling my lawyers right now. You'll all be sued. The hotel, you personally, everyone recording this. All of you." Sarah remained calm. "You are welcome to contact our legal department during business hours, Mr. Trump. Now, would you like me to call the Ritz-Carlton to check their availability?" "The Ritz. The Ritz." He practically spat the words. "You think you can pawn me off on the Ritz like some nobody? I own properties worth more than this entire block." "Owned," someone in the crowd emphasized, past tense. Trump whirled around again, pointing accusingly. "Who keeps saying that? Show yourself. This is harassment. That's what this is. I am being harassed in a public spa." "Actually, sir," Sarah corrected gently, "the Peninsula is private property. And speaking of which," she nodded to Alberto, the security chief, who stepped forward. Mr. Trump, I need to ask you to lower your voice or leave the premises. Or what? You'll call the police. Trump laughed harshly. Go ahead, call them. I know all the top guys in the NYPD. All of them. They love me in New York. Absolutely love me. More laughter from the crowd. Is that why you moved to Florida? Someone called out. Trump's face was now approaching a concerning shade of purple. This is, he sputtered, struggling to find words big enough for his rage. Sarah seized the moment of his speechlessness. Now, about those alternative hotels. I don't want alternative hotels, he exploded. I want to speak to whoever owns this place right now. I'm afraid the ownership group is not available at this hour, Sarah replied smoothly, though she knew for a fact that one of the major shareholders was currently having dinner downstairs. Not available? Not available. Trump's voice echoed off the marble walls. Do you have any idea how many people drop everything when I call? Presidents, prime ministers, kings. Perhaps, Sarah suggested, but unfortunately, none of them seem to have a spare hotel room for you tonight. The lobby dissolved into laughter again. Trump looked like he might explode, and that's when he reached for his second credit card. But the phones continued to record. Miss Patterson, who had just returned to the lobby, shook her head disapprovingly, although it was unclear if her disapproval was directed at Trump or the heckler. Perhaps, sir, Sarah attempted once more, I could recommend. Stop recommending, stop suggesting. Just get me a room, he interrupted, slamming his hand down on the counter harder than before. This is ridiculous. I am Donald Trump. Yes, sir, we've established that, Sarah replied, a trace of dryness entering her otherwise professional tone. However, your name doesn't change the fact that we have no vacancies. Someone in the crowd whispered loudly, Damn, she's got nerves of steel. Trump's face now matched the hue of his tie in its intensity. I'll remember this. All of you, he gestured wildly around the lobby, every person recording, every person laughing. I am having my people make a list. Your people, a voice called from the crowd. The ones in jail or the ones who turned on you? Jenny inched closer to the desk, visibly concerned for Sarah, who gave her a subtle head shake signaling her to stay back. Mr. Trump, Sarah stated firmly, you are disturbing our guests. If you continue to raise your voice. Disturbing, he erupted, throwing his hands up. You want to see disturbing? I'll show you disturbing. I'll have protesters outside this building tomorrow. Thousands of them. The biggest protest you've ever seen. An elderly gentleman at the bar snorted. Better check if they're not all in jail from the 6th of January 1st. The laughter that followed was immediate and widespread. Fuming, Trump pulled out his phone. That's it. I'm calling Fox News right now. Right now. They'll love this. Luxury hotel discriminates against Trump. It'll be bigger than the Bud Light scandal. Sarah maintained her composure. Sir, you are welcome to contact any media outlet you wish. Our policy on fully booked rooms will remain the same. The crowd had grown even larger, with hotel staff trying to maintain normal operations, but all eyes were intermittently glancing towards the scene. The pianist had given up entirely, sitting silently at his piano, phone out like everyone else. I am going to buy this place, Trump declared suddenly, and fire every one of you, especially you. He pointed at Sarah. You'll never work in hospitality again. Never. Sarah clasped her hands calmly in front of her. Sir, if you purchase the hotel, you're certainly welcome to make staffing changes. However, tonight, I am still the front desk manager, and we still have no rooms available. Several people in the crowd cheered at her response. Did someone get that on video? A woman called out. That was perfect. Trump's entire body was shaking with fury. You, he stuttered, struggling for words that could match his rage. You are just like the rest of them. The deep state, the fake news, all conspiring against me. A businessman in an expensive suit who had been observing from the bar spoke up. Sir, with all due respect, I think you are embarrassing yourself. Embarrassing? Embarrassing. Trump spun toward the voice. Do you know who I am? Yes, the businessman replied calmly. You are a man having a tantrum in a hotel lobby because you can't get your way. It's rather undignified. The crowd murmured in agreement. Several people nodded. Trump looked around, apparently realizing for the first time just how many people were watching and recording his meltdown. This isn't over, he growled, turning back to Sarah. Not by a long shot. I want to speak to the owner now. As I mentioned before, Sarah reiterated, her voice as calm as if discussing the weather, the ownership group is not available at this hour. Trump held up his hand, cutting her off. Stop, just stop. You think you are so clever, don't you? Little Sarah Chan from San Francisco. Well, let me tell you something. I've dealt with bigger hotels than this, much bigger, the biggest. And when I am done with this place, he reached for his wallet again, pulling out another credit card. Here, try this one, and this time look harder for those rooms. The lobby went quiet, everyone leaning in slightly to see what would happen next. Sarah took the second credit card, her well-trained fingers moving to the keyboard. The lobby had gone completely silent, the kind of heavy silence that feels like everyone is holding their breath. Run it again, Trump demanded, his voice carrying a hint of desperation that hadn't been there before. And this time, look harder for those rooms. Sarah inserted the card into the reader, keeping her face neutral. A group of Japanese businessmen had just stepped out of the elevator, stopping abruptly when they sensed the tension in the lobby. Processing now, sir, Sarah said professionally, though her stomach tightened as she waited for the response. Decline. The message flashed on her screen in red letters. Sarah kept her expression carefully blank, but Trump must have seen something in her eyes. What? What is it? He leaned forward over the counter, trying to see her screen. Sarah lowered her voice to a discreet whisper. I apologize, Mr. Trump. But the cameras continued to record. Miss Patterson, back in the lobby, shook her head disapprovingly, though it was unclear if it was directed at Trump or the heckler. Perhaps, sir, Sarah suggested again, I could recommend. Stop recommending, stop suggesting. Just get me a room, he demanded, slamming his hand down on the counter, harder this time. This is ridiculous. I am Donald Trump. Yes, sir, we've established that, Sarah responded, a hint of dryness seeping into her otherwise professional tone. However, your name doesn't alter the fact that we are fully booked. Someone in the crowd loudly whispered, Damn, she's got nerves of steel. Trump's face turned a shade so red it almost matched his tie. I'll remember this, all of you. He gestured wildly around the lobby, every person recording, every person laughing. I am having my people make a list. Your people, someone shouted from the crowd. The ones in jail or the ones who turned on you? Jenny, inching closer to the desk, looked concerned for Sarah, who subtly shook her head at her to stay back. Mr. Trump, Sarah said firmly, you are disturbing our guests. If you continue to raise your voice. Disturbing? Disturbing, he exclaimed, throwing his hands up. You want to see disturbing? I'll show you disturbing. I'll have protesters outside this building tomorrow. Thousands of them. The biggest protest you've ever seen. An elderly gentleman at the bar snorted. Better check if they're not all in jail from the 6th of January 1st. The laughter that followed was immediate and widespread. In a fury, Trump pulled out his phone. That's it. I'm calling Fox News right now. Right now. They'll love this. Luxury hotel discriminates against Trump. It'll be bigger than the Bud Light scandal. Sarah maintained her composure. Sir, you are welcome to contact any media outlet you wish. Our policy on fully booked rooms remains unchanged. The crowd had grown even larger, hotel staff trying to maintain normal operations while glancing intermittently at the unfolding drama. The pianist, having given up entirely, sat silently at his piano, phone out like everyone else. I am going to buy this place, Trump declared suddenly, pointing at Sarah, and fire every one of you, especially you. You'll never work in hospitality again. Never. Sarah clasped her hands calmly in front of her. Sir, if you purchase the hotel, you are certainly welcome to make staffing changes. However, tonight, I am still the front desk manager, and we still have no rooms available. Several people in the crowd cheered her response. Did someone get that on video? A woman shouted. That was perfect. Trump's entire body was shaking with fury. You, he stammered, searching for words that could express his rage. You are just like the rest of them. The deep state, the fake news, all conspiring against me. A businessman in an expensive suit, observing from the bar, spoke up. Sir, with all due respect, I think you're embarrassing yourself. Embarrassing? Embarrassing. Trump spun towards the voice. Do you know who I am? Yes, the businessman replied calmly. You're a man having a tantrum in a hotel lobby because you can't get your way. It's quite undignified. Murmurs of agreement came from the crowd, many nodding in approval. Trump looked around, realizing for the first time the extent of the audience for his meltdown. This isn't over, he growled, turning back to Sarah. Not by a long shot. I want to speak to the owner now. As I've mentioned before, Sarah reiterated, her voice as calm as if discussing the weather, the ownership group is not available at this hour. Trump, cutting her off, held up his hand. Stop, just stop. You think you are so clever, don't you? Little Sarah Chan from San Francisco. Well, let me tell you something. I've dealt with bigger hotels than this, much bigger, the biggest. And when I am done with this place, he fumbled for another credit card. Here, try this one. And this time, look harder for those rooms. The lobby fell silent, everyone's attention fixed on what would happen next. Sarah took the card, her fingers swiftly moving over the keyboard. The same red message popped up once again. Sir, she said softly, I am afraid this one is also. Don't say it, he interrupted, holding up his hand. Don't you dare say it. But it was too late. The whispers had already spread through the lobby. 3 cards, all declined. Someone near the bar laughed. Guess those legal bills are catching up. Trump spun around, his tie askew. Who said that? Who said that? No one claimed responsibility, but the cameras kept rolling. Sir, Sarah tried again, would you like me to call? Don't call anyone, he snapped back, desperation evident in his eyes. Just try again, please. The word please hung in the air, so unexpected it silenced the lobby. Donald Trump, begging a hotel receptionist, felt like a historic moment. Sarah ran the card again, but the result was unchanged. Declined. This is impossible, he muttered, more to himself than to her. Impossible. I'm a billionaire. Someone coughed from the crowd, past tense. Trump's hands shook visibly as he gathered his declined cards, a bead of sweat running down his temple despite the lobby's perfect temperature control. You'll regret this, he said, his voice lacking its usual force. All of you. Better check those credit cards first, someone called out, triggering another wave of laughter. Sarah maintained her professionalism, watching as the former president's image of wealth and power unraveled before everyone's eyes. Would you like me to try another card, sir? She asked quietly, knowing the question would sting but bound by her duty. Trump stared at her, his mouth opening and closing without words, as the lobby waited, cameras still rolling, witnessing the reality of the situation sinking in. And that's when they heard it, the quiet squeak of wheels on marble. Maria's cleaning cart approached, signaling the final act of this extraordinary evening. Trump's hands shook as he pulled out a fourth card, then a fifth. Sarah processed them mechanically, each one flashing the same red, declined message. The crowd watched in fascination as the former president's composure continued to crumble. "There has to be a mistake," he muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "My cards, they're platinum. All platinum." A young woman in designer clothes whispered loudly to her friend, "God, this is sad. Like, actually sad." But he seized onto this suggestion like a drowning man clutching a life preserver. "Yes, yes, that's it. Call the system now." Sarah replied with calm professionalism, "I'm afraid we can't make those calls on behalf of cardholders, sir." An older gentleman at the bar chuckled. "Might want to check with the bankruptcy court first." Trump's head snapped up, and he addressed the crowd with wild gestures. "You all think this is funny? You think this is a joke?" But his threats had lost their force. The man who had barged in demanding the presidential suite now seemed diminished. His posture slumped as he rifled through his wallet, muttering, just wait until I call my lawyer." "Better call your accountant first," someone shouted, igniting another round of laughter. As Trump pulled out his phone with shaking hands, attempting to make a call, he suddenly lowered it, his face turning ashen. "No signal," someone taunted, "or maybe no minutes left on the plan?" The lobby burst into laughter once again, Trump's complexion toggling between red and white like a faulty stoplight. This is, he stammered, struggling for words adequate to express his humiliation. "This is un-American. That's what this is." A well-dressed woman raised an eyebrow. "More un-American than not paying your bills?" "I pay my bills." Trump's voice cracked, defensive and strained. "I make the best payments. Nobody pays better than me." Except today, apparently, someone quipped loud enough for others to hear. As Trump's hands trembled, barely able to hold onto his wallet, credit cards, membership cards, and a crumpled Mar-a-Lago receipt spilled onto the counter. "Sir," Sarah offered gently, "would you like some help gathering your things?" "Don't touch them," he snapped, scrambling to collect his cards, several dropping in the process. "These are premium cards, exclusive. You've probably never even seen cards like these." "We see them quite often, sir," Sarah replied softly, her voice still gentle, though firm. "Though usually, they don't get declined." A sharp intake of breath from the crowd was followed by scattered applause. Someone cheered, "Receptionist for the win." Trump's expression cycled through anger, humiliation, desperation, and a trace of fear. "You don't understand," he said, his voice quieter, more defeated. "I am Donald Trump. Things like this, they don't happen to me." "First time for everything," a voice called out from the bar. He jabbed at his phone again. "I'm calling my sons. They'll fix this. They always do. The ones running your company into the ground." An innocent bystander inquired. Trump's hands dropped to his sides, his phone nearly slipping through his fingers. For a moment, he appeared lost, like a child who had strayed too far from familiar surroundings. "I could buy this place," he claimed, though his voice lacked any real conviction. "I could buy this whole block." "Maybe try buying dinner first," someone suggested from the crowd. As Trump's facade continued to crumble, Sarah observed his carefully constructed image of wealth and power dissolving before everyone's eyes, now captured on dozens of smartphones. "Would you like me to try another card, sir?" she asked, her voice respectful but underscored by the duty of her role. Trump looked at her, then at his scattered cards, and finally at the phones recording his downfall. For the first time since his arrival, he seemed to fully comprehend the gravity of his predicament. And that's when they all heard it, the quiet squeak of wheels on marble. Maria's cleaning cart approached, signaling the final act of this extraordinary evening. As the squeak of wheels made heads turn, Maria Ramirez pushed her cart through the crowd, her grey uniform pristine as always. At 67, Maria had been at the Peninsula longer than anyone else, even Sarah. Usually, she kept to herself, performing her duties with a thoroughness that had earned her Employee of the Month 15 times over her 23 years of service. But tonight was different. Maria stopped her cart a few feet from Trump, who was still fumbling with his cards. She watched him with an expression that caused several guests to lower their phones, sensing something more poignant than mere spectacle was about to unfold. "Mr. Trump," Maria began, her voice tinged with a slight Mexican accent, "you don't remember me." Trump barely glanced up, still focused on collecting his dignity along with his declined cards. "What? Who are you?" "Another one trying to capture your viral moment." Maria stepped closer, her tone steady and clear. 2008, Trump Tower. "I cleaned your floors, your windows, your bathrooms." 15 years ago, she articulated each word with deliberate clarity. "Do you remember now?" The lobby fell utterly silent, the usual ambient noises of the hotel seeming to fade into the background as if the building itself was holding its breath. "I cleaned your home for 3 years," Maria continued, "me and 20 others. We worked hard, very hard." Trump finally looked up, a flicker of recognition passing over his face, quickly replaced by uncertainty. "When we asked for fair pay, what did you do?" Maria's eyes never wavered from his. "You fired everyone. All of us. No warning, no last paycheck. Nothing. Do you remember that?" Trump's mouth opened and closed, but for once, no words came out. The crowd watched, phones still recording, as Maria's words seemed to strike a chord that resonated deeper than the superficial chatter of viral videos and social media fame. But the mood had shifted. This was no longer about mere entertainment. It had become a moment of historical reckoning unfolding in real time. Maria continued, her voice steady yet tinged with enduring pain. "My son was in college," she disclosed. "I had to pull him out because there was no money for tuition after you fired us. He joined the military instead." Someone in the crowd murmured, "Oh my God." Maria added, her voice breaking slightly, "He came back different. Not my happy boy anymore." She paused, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "All because we asked for fair pay, and you don't even remember us." Trump, finding his voice though noticeably softer than before, tried to deflect. "Listen, I don't know what you're talking about. I had managers. I wasn't directly involved." "You came to that meeting yourself," Maria interrupted him, her voice firm. "In the big conference room, you pointed at us and said, 'You're all fired,' just like on your TV show. You thought it was funny, a big joke. But for us," she gestured to herself, "it was not funny, not a joke." The phones, still recording, were now capturing a confrontation far more significant than a wealthy man's credit cards being declined. They were documenting a moment where power collided with truth, where privilege was confronted with its consequences. "That was just business," Trump stammered, trying to regain his composure. "Nothing personal." Maria's laugh was bitter. "Nothing personal? My son still has nightmares. My daughter had to quit school to work. Our family suffered. But to you, it's nothing personal." Sarah, observing from the front desk, maintained her professional demeanor but felt the gravity of Maria's revelations. Having known Maria for years and shared many early morning conversations, she had never known this part of her story. "You know what happened after you fired us?" Maria stepped closer to Trump, her presence commanding. "We found new jobs, better jobs, like here." She gestured around the Peninsula lobby. This place treats its workers like people, not trash to be thrown away. They provide benefits, fair pay, respect. Trump tried to stand taller, reclaiming some of his earlier defiance. Well, good for you. See, the system works. The American dream and all that. He tried to dismiss her. The system works, Maria's voice rose slightly, because we fight for it. Because we don't let men like you treat us like we're nothing. She scanned the lobby, filled with people still recording. Good, let them record. Let them see what happens when you treat people like disposable toys. During Maria's speech, Trump's complexion shifted from red to almost grey. The man who had swaggered in demanding the best suite now appeared deflated, diminished. "I don't have to listen to this," he muttered, trying to retreat. "This is harassment." Harassment. Maria's eyebrows arched. "You want to talk about harassment? Tell them about the women you fired when they complained about managers. Tell them about the families you destroyed because they asked for lunch breaks. Tell them about the children who lose their homes because you refuse to pay contractors." The lobby was eerily silent. You could hear ice melting in drinks at the bar. Every phone continued to record, preserving this confrontation for posterity. "I have to go," Trump murmured, his voice now barely a whisper, his demeanor one of someone beaten down by the unvarnished truth. "This is all a setup, a deep state conspiracy," he claimed, though his accusation carried little weight, lost in the undeniable reality of Maria's words. But his words rang hollow, even to his own ears. The man who had burst in demanding special privileges was now retreating from a cleaning lady armed with nothing but the truth in her eyes. "Yes, go," Maria said softly, yet with a firm undercurrent. "But remember this. Every time you try to act like the big man, the king of the world, remember there are people like me, people you've hurt, people you've forgotten. We remember, Mr. Trump. We all remember." As Trump turned toward the revolving doors, his shoulders were slumped, his usual swagger reduced to nearly a shuffle. Just as he reached the doors, Maria called out one last time, "Oh, and Mr. Trump." She waited until he turned around. "You left a mess on the counter." She pointed to his scattered, declined credit cards. "But don't worry. Cleaning up after you is something I've gotten quite used to." The lobby erupted in applause, not the mocking laughter from earlier, but genuine appreciation for a moment of unvarnished truth. Maria gave a small nod, then quietly returned to her cleaning cart. Trump disappeared through the revolving doors into the New York night, leaving behind his declined cards and the remnants of his meticulously crafted facade. Through the glass doors, they watched him get into a waiting car, not his usual limousine, but a hired sedan. As the car pulled away, the lobby slowly returned to its normal rhythm. The pianist resumed playing, guests returned to their conversations, and phones were finally lowered. But something fundamental had shifted. Everyone present knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, not merely the public shaming of a powerful man, but the triumph of truth spoken by those he had deemed insignificant. Sarah watched as Maria pushed her cart toward the elevators, returning to her duties as though nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. Their eyes met briefly, and Maria offered a small smile, the same smile she'd shared every morning for 7 years when she brought Sarah her first coffee of the day. In that smile was an unspoken dialogue about power, justice, and the quiet dignity of those who clean up after the mighty. The next morning, the videos would become viral, and the story would be picked up by every news outlet. But for now, in the elegant lobby of the Peninsula New York, there was just the soft sound of piano music, the quiet chatter of guests, and the barely audible squeak of Maria's cleaning cart as she continued her rounds, just as she had for 23 years. Some victories don't need headlines. Some justice isn't heralded with a bang, but with the quiet truth spoken by those who have waited years to speak. And sometimes, the most powerful moment isn't when the mighty fall, but when the overlooked rise, armed with nothing more than the truth. But their dignity and truth remained steadfast. Maria paused at the front desk, turning to Sarah with a warm smile. "I think he forgot his cards," she noted, gesturing to the scattered credit cards still on the counter. A well-dressed businessman approached, addressing Maria respectfully. "Ma'am, I've traveled the world and stayed at some of the finest hotels, but I've never witnessed anything quite like that." "You are a hero." Maria shook her head modestly. "No hero, just telling the truth." Although phones were still out, people now requested to take photos with her. Politely, she declined each one. "I have work to do." "Floors don't clean themselves," she stated. A young woman from the area called out, "Is it true about your son, Maria?" She paused, her hands resting on her cleaning cart. "Yes, my Carlos. He served 3 tours, and now he teaches history at Bronx High School, telling students why the truth matters." As Maria continued down the hallway, the squeak of her cart's wheels fading into the distance, the lobby buzzed with excitement. Guests recounted the spectacle to those who had missed it. "Did you catch all of it?" a man asked his wife. "The whole thing, every second," she responded, tapping her phone, already buzzing on social media, Twitter or X, whatever they're calling it now. Marcus, the supervisor, approached Sarah's desk. "You handled that perfectly," he commended quietly. "Both of you did." Sarah responded, "I didn't do anything, really. It was all Maria." Marcus smiled. "Sometimes doing nothing is doing everything. You gave her space to speak her truth. That's not nothing." The pianist resumed playing, but the conversations throughout the lobby still revolved around the events that had just unfolded. Guests shared their videos, comparing angles and discussing the most impactful moments. "Did you see his face when she mentioned Afghanistan?" one guest remarked. "I've never seen him speechless before," another added. An elderly couple, long-time guests of the Peninsula, approached the desk. "Miss, we've been coming here for 20 years, but tonight we've never been prouder to be guests here," they expressed. Sarah maintained her professional demeanor. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. Will you be needing a wake-up call tomorrow?" The evening continued with a flurry of check-ins and guest requests, but the atmosphere in the lobby had shifted. Even late-night arrivals seemed to sense that something significant had occurred. As midnight neared and her shift ended, Maria returned with their nightly ritual, 2 cups of coffee. "Are you okay after everything?" Sarah asked, accepting her cup gratefully. Maria's eyes twinkled with a knowing smile. "You know what my mother always said. La verdad no peca, pero incomoda. The truth doesn't sin, but it makes people uncomfortable." They shared a moment of comfortable silence, savoring their coffee as they had done countless times before. "Do you think he learned anything tonight?" Sarah finally asked. Maria shrugged. "Men like that don't learn, but others learn by watching them fall. That's enough." As the night shift receptionist arrived, Sarah began handing over her duties. Noticing Trump's declined credit cards still on the counter, she asked Marcus, "What should we do with these?" He considered for a moment. "Put them in Lost and Found, though I doubt he'll be back to claim them." Stepping out into the cool New York night, Sarah's phone buzzed with news alerts. The videos were trending, and the story would soon be picked up by major outlets. Tomorrow would bring headlines, think pieces, and endless debates on social media. But right now, she reflected on the evening, a night where Justice had worn a grey uniform and spoken with a slight Mexican accent. In a luxury Manhattan hotel, the smallest voices had indeed carried the most weight. As she walked away, the gleaming facade of the peninsula behind her, she knew that sometimes the most profound victories were not about winning or losing, but about standing your ground and speaking your truth.